Good day. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to make your interviewer trust you in job interviews. And right from the start, there's an optimism bias for candidates in the way they think they're perceived in job interviews. So, long story short, interviewers are less likely to trust you than you think in job interviews. Okay, and let me just start by saying what will seriously diminish your chances to be perceived as a trustworthy candidate. That is, the trust breakers, so to speak. Things such as reliability, for example. There are candidates who do not show on time to job interviews. This happens quite a lot. I know it. It's also in my coaching business. It happens, unfortunately, still. Okay. Dishonesty and bluffing. This is, also a very common trust breaker. So it's quite common for candidates to think as if in your tell me about yourself, you must sell yourself, so to speak, with a few metrics you didn't really owe. Well, in my experience, that's a very common trust breaker. Job interviews can seriously derail your chances to build trust. Okay, poor preparation of job interviews is perceived as a trust breaker, especially with high-performing companies, especially during final interview rounds. Okay, because there the investment on the employer side is considerable, and so they expect your investment to match that as well. Okay, negatively speaking about your past employers, past colleagues, your boss, and stuff like that is also a very common trust breaker in job interviews. Okay, now, how can you possibly improve your chances to be perceived as a trustworthy candidate? Because in my experience, the moment you're perceived as a trustworthy candidate and you're qualified for the job, that's the best formula for success in job interviews. So there's two things you must keep in mind. First, it's the small talk in the beginning of your interview to build a rapport with your interviewer. So it's more often than candidates realize that if you understand each other well with your interviewer, chances are you will have the opportunity to more easily convince them you're the right person for the job. But not only that, you will also understand when they're not happy with how you perform during a job interview and eventually adjust. Okay, so building rapport is also is the first significant step towards building trust in job interviews. Okay. Also on the same topic, if a little hack, if you want, or the cheat, if you know yourself that you have a story bank that you're really proud of, you could also consider sharing it with your interviewers even prior or during or after your job interviews as a way to establish trust if you have nothing to hide. Remember what I said in the beginning of the video, because most candidates assume their interviewer will trust them. But it's, in my experience, not all the case. So if you have a story bank, you could also consider sharing it with them in full, right? Before, during, or after your job interview. But the main thing I wanted to communicate in this video is that the most efficient approach to building trust in job interview, in a job interview, would be to answer trust questions well. Okay, so in other words, candidates who can convince their interviewers that they can establish trust in a professional setting are also far more likely to be perceived as a trustworthy candidate in a job interview, right? So there's a correlation here, right? So correlation doesn't always mean causation, but in job interviews, it's quite often the case. So if they correlate that you can answer trust questions well, you will be significantly more likely, and is the most efficient approach if you want to optimize your chances to build trust in job interviews. Now you may wonder, hey, but what are some trust questions? And is this such a big deal after all? Well, it is, because in some companies, for example, in Amazon, there's a leadership principle that's essential for most roles whenever going to an Amazon interview, that of earned trust, right? And that of earned trust has, some specific questions, which I'm sharing with you right now on screen for you to take a look at. So the moment you do well in answering trust questions, tell me about the time when you had to communicate a change in direction that you anticipated people would have concerns with, or give an example of a tough or critical piece of feedback you received. These types of questions. The moment you score well on these, that's the best formula to convince them that you are a trustworthy candidate, right? Because behavioral interviews at their core are all about sharing your past experiences as a predictor of success in your future role. Now you could argue that, hey, yeah, any past experience would be perceived as trustworthy plus. Yes, but still earn trust stories from your past are the best predictor or are the best way to improve your chances to build trust and to have your interviewer to trust you in job interviews. All right, so long story short, beware of trust breakers, build great rapport, to connect well with your interviewer, and be careful of preparing and answering well trust types of questions. This would be my 3-step process to earn your interviewer's trust in job interviews. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.